Are you familiar with FBI Special Agents Kyle Seraphin?
I'm familiar with the name.
Is that yes?
I'm familiar with the name. Familiar with the name. Familiar with the name.
Let's bring in Kyle Seraphin. He's the FBI whistleblower who helped expose government censorship of our First Amendment rights.
Now, we only have this memo because a recently suspended FBI agent called Kyle Seraphin brought it to the public. And we're grateful that he did. Kyle, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
He's the host of something that strangely is called the Kyle Seraphin Show.
Kyle Seraphin, I can't thank you enough for speaking out. I knew you guys were out there, and I knew it was just a matter of time, but you got a lot of guts putting your face and your name to this. You're doing a service on behalf of the American people, and from the bottom of my cracked and broken heart sometimes, thank you very much.
Take a look behind the curtain with a real whistleblower and American patriot. Prepare to embrace the uncomfortable truth because this program has no time for comforting lies. Here is civil liberties enthusiast, Second Amendment defender, and recovering FBI agent Kyle Seraphin.
Well, hello, my friends. Welcome to the Kyle Seraphin Show. Today is Monday. It is September the 30th. We are coming to the end of this month, and we are getting ready for the month of October. And the question that I have is, are we looking at an October surprise? There's been some pretty good ones, even in my lifetime. The October surprise is a political term for an unexpected disruptive event that changes the game, changes the calculus, changes the way that people might have otherwise been thinking about a way an election would go in America. Jim Comey was responsible for one. Democrats were pretty upset about it. I would say that Jim Comey thought he was actually helping Hillary Clinton. It's funny how sometimes the plans that men have don't go the way that they would think they should. Most of the time, I think that's the case. I had a really nice long weekend. I'm going to tell you a little bit about that because I got to meet with some folks. I got to talk to some very nice folks in Tennessee. I spent the entire weekend traveling, so there's been no break from last week and this week for me. This week is all run together. And so as I'm looking at it, I'm trying to organize what looks like a lot of chaotic events happening at the same time. Some of them are what we would call sort of acts of God, natural disasters. Some of them are acts of men that have been brewing for a long time, but acts of violence and war and sort of things happening out in the outer sphere of my peripheral awareness because I'm not permanently engaged in what happens in the Middle East or shipping channels over on the other side of the world. And then some things that are coming home here to our world. And I got the tail end of that hurricane in eastern Tennessee, but it obviously hit North Carolina very aggressively, including some blue counties out there that look like they're in a bad spot. So the thing that occurred to me that I wanted to talk about, maybe a unifying principle about all of this, is learned helplessness. We're going to be talking about a potential October surprise, but I want to talk about it through the lens of learned helplessness. If you've never heard this concept, we're going to get into that much more deeply. I'm just going to tease it out there, but we will talk about dock workers. We will talk about what's happening in Israel's conflict, just at least a cursory touch on it, because I think it does affect the way that young people are looking at this. It also affects the way that the political media has sort of thrown their support behind one side. So we're going to talk about all those things today. Before we do, I want to actually say thanks to my buddies over at Patriot Coolers. You guys know that they're a longtime sponsor. I got something. I never do this, but I saved something that came in the mail while I was gone. And I have my box from the Patriot Cooler Company that just showed up. And I'm going to actually open this first time. I haven't even seen it, what's in here. So we're just going to open it up on the air here. So there's some paper. There's a lot of paper, actually. And I tell you guys, they do a really beautiful job of boxing their products. Going to throw that in the back and make a mess for myself later. This is the Major. This is their newest product, and I'm kind of excited to see what it looks like. All right. 223 Jubilee just said, "What's in the box?" Great movie. Such a good movie. Okay, so let's see what they've got here. I'm telling you, they have some of the most patriotic and like really attractive packaging. I'm the kind of guy that keeps boxes. I have to force myself to throw these out if I'm going to. All right, so we're getting a straw. That's not half bad. So you got some kind of a straight straw. I tend to do silicone straws instead of this. But this is kind of like their competition, I would say, to some of these other tumblers out there. Look at this. Boom. The Suspendables badge laser etched into a red mug. This thing is going to look awesome out here. And they've got it on the right side for me to be able to drink it while I'm sitting and working. All right, so if you guys want to get your own Patriot Coolers, the new mug, this one's called the Major. It's 40 ounces of cold or hot goodness. I don't know how many of you are drinking 40 ounces of coffee, but I could do that. There definitely was a time when I was doing that during surveillance. Check them out. Go look at it. It's promo code Kyle, K-Y-L-E. K-Y-L-E. It'll save you 10%. Neat. I'm going to have to do some more. I'll give you a full review after I get to actually use it. But I wanted to break it out for you guys here. And you'll notice they say right here on the packaging, they actually put it in front of it. It's part of what they're all about, that they actually give back to veterans. And with this purchase, a donation will be made to the Homes for Our Troops organization. Pretty special. And since it's not filled, I can actually show you back here. You can see all those little dimples on the bottom of this thing? There are 50 stars. They put them on every single one. And then underneath here will be the 13 bars. So this is a company that actually brands in Patriot. They mean it, and they actually make it part of their product. Really cool stuff. I really like them. Anyway, I want to do that with you guys just because it's Monday and we're going to start off just a little bit slower. Let's talk about learned helplessness. So, learned helplessness is a thing. This is coming from Psychology Today, from their editorial staff. It occurs when an individual continuously faces negative and uncontrollable situations and stops trying to change their circumstances, even when they have the ability to do so. In other words, here's an example. A smoker may repeatedly try and fail to quit, and then through the frustration, come to believe that nothing he does will help, and therefore stops trying to quit altogether. It's the perception that one cannot control the situation that essentially elicits a passive response to the harm that is occurring. What does that mean for us today in a political environment where things are bigger, badder, weirder, uglier? I think a lot of the news cycle that we see, and I consume as much as anybody that I know, not a healthy amount. I think the news cycle is geared towards training Americans towards learned helplessness. You see problems that are too big to solve. You see problems that you cannot handle. If you're young and you're foolish, you do what the Jordan Peterson sort of advice, the opposite of the Jordan Peterson advice. Rather than cleaning up your corner of the world, making your bed, cleaning your room, affecting your local politics where your vote actually is going to count and it's going to be decided by dozens of votes in your town. And you could probably recruit your neighbors to change individual elections, the government that is closest to you. What we do is we get distracted by sort of an idolatry type focus, this large, I spoke on a stage yesterday, day before yesterday, and I said, Americans right now are looking for a king. And that seems really obvious to me. And why do you want a king? Why do you ask for a king? The Israelites did this in the Old Testament. They begged God for a king because they saw that God was enormous and all-powerful and all-knowing and impossible for man to understand. And they said, just give us someone who's like us, who's going to get closer to us, who's going to be imperfect, who's going to screw it up, but makes really good promises. It feels good to have a king. It feels good to have a king because it's a single point of responsibility that is another person and not ourselves. I think that Americans are at a point where we're looking for a king too. Whether you love Donald Trump or not, you can see the national climate is a learned helplessness. It's like, we can't fix this. We just need Donald Trump to come in and solve all these problems. I see it on social media all the time. We just need Donald Trump to come in and get rid of these 75,000 IRS agents they're going to hire. We need Donald Trump to come in and just cut off the head of the snake and just root it out. He's going to get it. He's going to put the right people in. The left thinks the same thing, by the way. We just need Kamala Harris because if we get Donald Trump, it's all over for us. Everything is going to be destroyed. And we won't be able to continue. He's a threat to democracy. Meanwhile, she's being installed. And so this weekend was a nice reminder to me that the people around you are far more important than the quote unquote king, than the leader, than the folks that we're talking about electing. There's a lot of bad information out there. There's a lot of false information. There's a lot of people that are getting you whipped up and they're weaponizing your attention span. They're weaponizing your sentiment, your feelings. They're getting you emotionally reactive so that you're going to go and do things that they want. They're driving you to the polls to vote the way that they want you to vote. And probably it aligns with your values. But what sort of fear is also being used? And who's making money on it? You should be asking these questions. There are people that are making money on your fear. There are people that are about to drop some wild stuff on us. And some of it is out of our control. Some of these things have nothing to do with man. But there's some that do, like a longshoreman strike. And then there's also the normalization of violence. And then there's also what is brought into our attention span. So this morning, like always, I went to CNN to go see what they think is important. 5 things that you should know. They put these out all the time, by the way. I rarely cover their sort of what I would call like a survey. But this is their survey. 5 things that we should know about what's going on. And those things are Helena's? I don't know how to pronounce that, actually. I've been calling it Hurricane Helen, but it may not be Helene. Damage, so that's the hurricane that swept up across the East Coast. The Middle East, just broadly speaking, which is very interesting, their coverage of the Middle East. A VP debate coming up, chemical plant fire, and SpaceX. I don't think SpaceX actually has anything to do with me. But what they say is the Southeast United States, all the way up into the Carolinas, grasping with widespread devastation after the hurricane made landfall. And we're talking about over 100 dead at this point. Just catastrophic. I've been watching some people's TikTok videos before and after of their property. One of my buddies told me his farm was just devastated. He thought his barn was going to fly away. The Middle East story talks about Israeli airstrikes in Lebanon, in Beirut, which is the first time that that's happened since October 7th, and the way that invasion, the Israelis are very calculating. They're doing things in sort of an escalation of force, moving towards what they think is going to be advantageous for their country. So be it. We're looking at a high stakes political debate. Maybe. I don't know if anybody's undecided at this point, but the debate is going to happen on Tuesday, just 5 weeks before the election. And that's the Waltz-Vance debate. Interesting. You can always tell who you think is the most important by who you lead with. Isn't that right? You introduce yourself. You say hello to the people that you think you're supposed to in order of importance. We sort of do this, like we sort of accidentally do that. And it's not like they switched it back and forth. So CNN thinks that Waltz is the most important. It's interesting. They show a picture, by the way, which I don't have on the screen right now, but it looks like J.D. Vance is confused and Tim Walz looks very determined. So that's something I think is important. A chemical fire happening in Georgia, shelter-in-place advisories. This is one of those like logistical things. This is stuff that has been happening. I haven't seen them cover it much before, but they're talking about same kind of stuff. We've seen pollutants and things hitting the atmosphere. Fire happening. And SpaceX. And I don't even want to talk about SpaceX because it's not interesting. And then I went over to The Loop. My friends over at Catholic Vote put out a nice little piece, and they're focusing on something else, which I think is a little bit more cultural. When you choose your news source, you actually choose the news that you are going to get. You're going to choose the slant, but you also choose the editorial coverage. And so the lead stories over there, the top 5 stories they have in today's Loop are as follows. SNL makes fun of the Donald Trump assassination attempts. I'm going to tell you why I think that's really important. Vance has turned away from a food chain that welcomed Kamala Harris. He went to a popular food place in Pennsylvania, and was turned away. It's a sandwich shop. It had people, up in arms on social media over the weekend, which I was mostly tuned out from, but I'm aware of it at least. And now I'm aware of it also because of The Loop. Lawmakers introduced a bill to honor pro-life centers out of Virginia. The Pope is denouncing pornography as demonic. And a wounded Marine says the administration ignored his mother. So when you look at the way that people focus on what's happening, I see CNN looking for the bleeds it leads type. They're looking at conflict. They're looking at things that are bad. They're saying, okay, these things, but do any of them actually cast a reasonable light on what we have coming up in 5 weeks? And it doesn't seem like they do. So I wanted to talk a little bit about first the abortion thing, because it pops up all the time in my Catholic Vote feed. It's something that was priority number 1, and they believe it's a winning issue still. And if we've forgotten about that because there's natural disasters and logistical supply chain strikes and world events where people are starting to begin wars in various regional places around the globe. Remember, the Biden administration wanted to run on this, that they thought this was the single biggest winning issue because they can't run on the economy, and they certainly can't run on what they've done at the border. So they're going to run on Donald Trump is bad because he's going to take away your abortions. And so there's all these lies that have been pushed out there. And Senator Langford did a little piece, pushed it out on social media. I like this video because it's just a quick yes or no. And it's testimony from witness they brought in front to talk about all of the things that we keep hearing. And there's this theme. It's mis, dis, and malinformation. We've been talking about this on this program since I began. It's something that the FBI got itself involved in. We saw this evidence through the Twitter files. We saw that they were doing these things, were they not? And as they did this, they're able to push false information. They want to try to curate the information in your brains. And this comes from places like the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA, who said that they want to regulate the cognitive infrastructure of America. I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but those words, cognitive infrastructure, they mean the processor in between your ears, that gray matter that the government wants to actually try to regulate what goes into your brain, because they can't regulate how you think, but they can regulate what you take in, and how you're going to process that is actually fairly predictable. And they're pushing this crazy narrative that somehow Donald Trump banned abortions during his term, even though the Dobbs decision happened while Joe Biden was president, and it sent it back to the states, and it sent it back to the places that are closer to where you live, so you can make decisions with the people that live in the states that think the way you do or don't. And all of this has to do with learned helplessness, because in theory, what they're saying, the political left continues to say, is that we need a king, or in this case, a queen, to regulate all of these problems we have. We need to delegate it to one person with the right ideas that agree with us, even though they only have about 50% of the backing of the population on either side. And that person is going to set it straight. When the answer that our founding fathers came up with, was that your counties and your cities and then your states, and then lastly and least, the federal government would try to solve problems. This has to do with national disasters. It has to do with supply chain shortages. It has to do with all of the things that are happening outside of foreign policy. There's not a lot of things that I trust the federal government to get involved in. And the only reason foreign policy is because it doesn't have to do with me as much. I just have to pay for it. So we can have consensus there. But we should have much more local consensus about the way we do it. But instead, we keep hearing about the federal, the highest level. And that creates, my argument is that it creates a learned helplessness. Let me give you this video, because women are being told that the federal government has basically created this problem for them. And none of the things that they're being told are true, if they are supporters of abortion, which I think is already wrong.
Ms. Hackler, just to clarify on this, are there any states where women face prosecution for having an abortion?
No.
Are there any states that criminalize miscarriage?
No.
Or that care for a miscarriage?
No.
Are there any states that criminalize removing an ectopic pregnancy?
No.
Are there any states that prohibit life-saving care for the mother?
No.
Are there any states where women have to be actively dying for a doctor to be able to act for her care?
No.
There's been a lot of rhetoric in this that I'm concerned pushes people away from getting access to health care. Vice President Harris, in a speech recently, said that women were being arrested and facing prosecution for experiencing miscarriages. Ms. Hackler, do you know of a single instance where a woman has been arrested for having a miscarriage or getting health care for that?
No, treatment for miscarriage is allowed under the law, and there have been instances where I think that one example of that that's been pointed to is misleading, because the woman, I think she was in Ohio, the charges against her were not abortion related, and so it's misleading to use that as an example.
You guys get that? All of those answers that were no's are all things that have been pushed in campaign speeches, either by surrogates of or by the people that are running for national office right now. And I was watching you all in the chat answer along with the questions from Senator Langford. No, no, no. And yet, if you were to put the same questions in front of a lot of women who have been ideologically motivated to vote based on abortion, they all would say yes, wouldn't they? Because they've been programmed, they've had this information shared, and they're just lapping it up. And I guess if you don't know how to be a skeptic, I actually had this experience with one of the folks that I hung out with. I hung out with Joe Altman over the weekend. I met David Clements, Professor David Clements. I got to hang out with him in person. And Joe's blowing up my phone this morning. Hey, here's all these things going on. And I said, the first thing to do is to be a skeptic. Like, whatever it is that you want to believe, you should try to punch holes in that. And he said, I am. And it's like, okay, good. That's what should be happening. We're not seeing a skeptical public. We're not seeing people think and take responsibility for themselves. They have a learned helplessness. That's why you accept spoon feeding. There's too much information. There's too much going on. How can anyone do it? I just have to put my faith in a CNN. I just have to put my faith in an MSNBC. I just have to listen to Rolling Stone. But why? If you want information, you do the work. If you don't, then just say, I don't know. The left wants more people to vote and them to be less informed. I would like less people to vote and then be more informed. There are some times when I don't know the answer and I don't want to vote on something because I don't have a strong opinion either way. Maybe some other people do. The problem is if uninformed people are the ones doing it and they're being told that they should. Here's a question that I have. Is anyone fact-checking when the current president, allegedly, when the current alleged president is out there pushing out that he got prepared for this hurricane disaster relief? There's two questions I want to have. Number one, why is the federal government the answer? When in fact, it should be things like your neighbors. It should be people that live next to you. It should be the people in your state that solve the problems. I'm very sympathetic on an intellectual level to what's happening in North Carolina, and I'm also aware that it's too far for me to deal with. But if something happened here in Texas, I have that ability. I don't know that it's reached a national level yet. Yeah, should we not be sending money to Ukraine? I agree. We should not be. We shouldn't be sending money all over the world for other problems. So the United States should have its own money, but not that we should send it to the federal government and it should hold on to it and wait to come and save us. It should be left with the states. We kept talking about what is the solution all over. That was the theme of this weekend. How do we fix this? How do we solve this? And the answer is that the control needs to remain closer and closer to you. When people say we, the people, are the solution, I mean, we are. No one is going to come and save us, least of all the federal government. So don't put your faith in the federal government. You need to stop. You need to readjust. You have a learned helplessness problem where you think if we just elect the right people, then they will fix these issues. Show me the example of that happening. I don't see it. I haven't seen it. I lose sleep over this stuff. This is what keeps me up at night. This is what makes me have just chaotic dreams when I close my eyes. Because all of the things we keep trying do not work. I'm going to go back to something that happened early in my whistleblowing experience. One of the things that I actually exposed through Project Veritas. And yes, I don't like James O'Keefe, but that doesn't mean that they were not useful to the purposes that I had. One of the purposes was people need to understand that the Betsy Ross flag that I have over my shoulder is a representative. It's something that someone on Twitter sent me, of all places. Wonderful family. It's signed on the back from the family that sent it all the way across the country from Virginia. But it reminds me that the FBI classified people who wanted to be prepared for such things as happened in Asheville, North Carolina, wanted us to not be connected. Because one of the things, in addition to saying that the Gadsden flag and the Betsy Ross flag and the Second Amendment and saying Ashley Babbitt was a martyr, like saying these things are all a problem because it makes you a militia, violent extremist. But what is the militia capable of doing? It's people that are organized, trained, have techniques, have tools to solve problems at the local level. They're the people from the community. Like you are the militia, whatever it is in your area, you're that militia. And have you shirked that responsibility? Just because that's not what's required for you to carry and own a gun doesn't mean that there is not a requirement for us to actually connect with our neighbors. And the thing that was on that militia, violent extremist warning page, the symbols guide that the FBI had under the counterterrorism banner, was a group called the American Contingency. And AMCON, American Contingency, started by Mike Glover, a Green Beret, someone who's been overseas, that's seen war in multiple different theaters. His concept was you should be able to connect with your neighbors and know where you are strong and they are weak, and where you are weak and they are strong. Because just like in the military, every single unit cannot be an expert. Every single member of the unit cannot be an expert at all things. Look at a Special Forces ODA. They have a comms guy. They have a weapons guy. Doesn't mean that everybody can't use comms. Doesn't mean everybody can't use a weapon. But one person specializes with a high level of capabilities in that field. There's an intel guy. There's a medic. There's an engineer. They bring all of these things together so that everybody can function a little bit. They're cross-trained, but somebody is a specialist because we can't spend all of our time getting the best, and we're not all going to be interested at the best things. So somebody in your neighborhood knows how to fix engines, and somebody is good at emergency medicine, and somebody knows a lot about guns and setting up the perimeter and security systems. And somebody understands how to use comms, satellite, microwave, radio frequencies. This was the goal of American contingency. And what did they do? They, being the federal government, leaned on private industries. By the way, that's called fascism most of the time. Most of you don't know what the definition, or most people on the left cannot define it, but it's when the federal government doesn't take ownership of, but it determines the outcomes of private businesses. Fascism takes place when our government leans on somebody and says, wouldn't it be nice if you pulled him off the platforms? So he got taken off Shopify, so he couldn't sell his goods. He got debanked and he got pulled out of platforms. He's still available on locals, just like we are. And you can go there and support what they're doing. But they're not a militia, violent extremist group. Even though the FBI's analyst who created that document referred to them as an online militia group with a low history of violence. And in the same month when we released that, there was evidence that Mike Glover's group had actually helped people in national emergencies, that they deployed people and resources and money and tools and know-how to go help their neighbors. The thing that we should do, it's the opposite of learned helplessness. It is action by preparation. It is preparedness that allows other people who have not to be repaired. And the federal government is basically leaning you away from that. I've been queuing up this clip about Joe Biden. He said that they were going to go help people in an ideal world, and an American world where Americans live by the values that Americans state that they have. They wouldn't need the federal government to spin up resources because the resources would remain local. And that's the reason that our this massive departure from the way our Constitution designed this country, it has real effects. I'm going to tell you a couple more. I'm going to end with something about body cam footage of a woman in Ohio that seems to have nothing to do with any of this, and it has everything to do with it. So stick around all the way through. Here's Joe Biden saying they prepared, they put assets on the ground. I don't believe that because I've seen some images from the ground. It doesn't look like there's federal resources, but there probably shouldn't have been, and the money should have remained locally. That's not Joe Biden. That's Kamala Harris saying she wants to get rid of our guns. Sorry, this is video number 3. Here we go.
Do you have any words for the victims of Whistleblowing? Yes, it's tragic. As a matter of fact, we're trying to get the exact number. My FEMA advisor is on the ground in Florida right now. There's a distinction between the numbers that FEMA's used and the ones that are used by the locals. So it really is amazing. You saw the photographs. It's stunning.
It's unbelievable. It really is. Such a wide area.
And we've given them all everything that we have. We're on the ground ahead of time, so we're working hard.
Are there any more resources the federal government could be giving them?
No, we've given them. We have pre-planned a significant amount of it, even though they didn't ask for it yet.
We pre-planned a significant amount, and there's no more resources that could be given. I can think of a couple of $1 billion that were handed over to the Ukrainian government. Maybe that would have been helpful. Maybe if you made our money worth more by not giving it away, printing it and handing it overseas by the pallet load, that'd be helpful. The thing that blew my mind about all that is that Kamala Harris, she's the one who's getting the real briefings on this. The Vice President of the United States, who's standing, in this case, she's standing in front of the seal of the Vice President of the United States, but has been standing, as my friend George Hill pointed out the other day. She's been giving speeches in front of the seal of the President of the United States of America, a visual optic that continues to inform me that we are not about to have a free, fair, reasonable, or an election that represents the way people feel in this country. Because I do think an overwhelming number of people are probably more likely favorable to a Donald Trump based on the way that he's handled business. But I have no expectation that he's going to ever be allowed to get back into the White House. I would love to be wrong. Nothing would make me happier, honestly. As you know, I'm not a fan of the man, but I'm a fan of choosing better policies and better potential opportunities over this. Someone who has embraced fascism, legitimate fascism, as I just defined it earlier. Someone who's embraced political censorship at a level that is terrifying and should absolutely blow the minds of Americans. Kamala Harris is the one who got the briefings. When was the last time a vice president was recalled from a tour or a political campaign or anything along those lines and runs back to D.C. to get briefed up? Why? Is she making operational decisions? What is vice president doesn't have any authority to make those decisions. And what decisions are we talking about? Like deploying the National Guard and those resources, signing executive orders, declaring emergencies, like leading the departments under the executive? That's not supposed to happen. So this is yet another little story here that leads me to believe that we're not about to see what we would hope, which is that the American people get to have a say. And as part of that learned helplessness, a lot of people are throwing up their hands and saying, if this doesn't go our way, then it's all over. This sort of black pill. I can do two things at once. I can expect that there's not going to be a fair election. And I can also say that it's going to be okay. Because I believe that your job is not to worry as much about what this, long distance king or queen wants to do with this nation. And you solve the problems with your neighbors on your street. You solve the problems with the people in your community. We have to be keepers of our brothers in this way. We need to be looking around those that are either suffering or have an opportunity and don't know where to apply their skill set in our own community. So I'm aware of a national thing that is happening, that Kamala Harris is being given these briefs apparently, and is being flown in so that she can be aware of the federal actions to support emergency response and recovery. Again, this is coming from CNN. They talked about at least 95 people killed. Millions of them have lost power. The people who are going to restore power are not going to be people from the federal government. They're just not. The federal government doesn't have linesmen. They don't employ it like a series, like a roving band of linesmen to go install power. It's going to be people who are local and from the local communities that are around that community that are able to mobilize, that didn't have their homes destroyed, that are going to step up and help the one right next to them. It's going to be your neighbors, folks. It's going to be people within your state or the neighboring states that can get there. And perhaps some people that do get to roll across the country. They may have the ability to do that if there's money. And maybe the federal government's job is writing that check. But that check comes from all of us. It's our money. And it shouldn't be decided by someone who's running around standing in front of a seal that is so distant from us. It's hard to watch this stuff. It really is. I know most of you. I believe that a lot of this learned helplessness is something that they would like it to be stronger. And John Kerry kind of dropped the veil on that. John Kerry probably had the most impactful and unsettling 2 minutes, which I'm going to play the entirety of. He's speaking, the banner you're going to see on the screen here is the World Economic Forum. So he's speaking to the quote unquote global elites. And he's saying that we need to control the information. We would like to be able to eliminate voices that do not agree. We are having a hard time building consensus in our democracy. It is so important that we focus in on that language because democracy, again, equals the tyranny of the majority. It's majoritarianism, which is a form, I suppose, of authoritarianism. It means 50% plus one tells the almost equal number of people what we're going to do. And if you are controlling the ballot boxes and doing things which I've been listening to all weekend, I've been listening to people like Joe Hoft from the Gateway Pundit, David Clements, Joe Altman. I'm just listening to them say, and I have no reason to think otherwise because I don't know what goes on in the machines. And neither do you, to be fair. Like, they're black boxes. People can run the code and tell you, but if you don't have the wherewithal to go and double check their research, what I know is that they used to do paper ballots in my lifetime, and America was a very big place, and we had a winner the next morning. And now it takes longer and longer to go through something that should be faster because it's electronic. We're not doing precinct level balloting. So until that happens, and by the way, the Republicans didn't fix it. These people didn't change it. They didn't solve that problem for us, did they? So are they complicit? Do they enjoy it? Is that what they're all about? Here's John Kerry. He's dropping the veil. He's telling you 100% that they need to be able to control the information flow, which should tell you everything you need to know, that you need to diversify what you grab. There's a reason why I almost exclusively grab left-wing sources, because I'm only interested in what people who disagree with me have to say about the world. And I can disagree with them, but I better have reasons for it. It better not just be like my feelings. So here's a little evidence for you that they're doing this on purpose, and they would like to do it more. And the other evidence is, we just saw, I'm going to tell you more about Marcus Allen. I'll give you an update. But Marcus Allen's video that he put out, the first interview that he's done since his testimony, Marcus Allen being the former FBI SOS, Staff Operations Specialist, an intel guy. His video got pulled down from YouTube last night, right after it went live, and very few people even saw it. This is something that was seen by the dozens of people on YouTube. They cannot have dissenting voices in the same way that my voice gets pulled down off Facebook. If you think it's an accident, here's John Kerry telling you it's all intentional and they'd like to do more.
And I think the dislike of and anguish over social media is just growing and growing and growing. And it's part of our problem, particularly in democracies, in terms of building consensus around any issue. It's really hard to govern today. You can't, there's no, the referees we used to have to determine what's a fact and what isn't a fact have kind of, been eviscerated to a certain degree. And people go, and then people self-select where they go for their news or for their information. And then you just get into a vicious cycle. So it's really, really hard, much harder to build consensus today than at any time in the 45, 50 years I've been involved in this. And there's a lot of discussion now about how you curb those entities in order to guarantee that you're going to have, some accountability on facts, et cetera. But look, if people go to only one source and the source they go to is sick and, has an agenda and they're putting out disinformation, our First Amendment stands as a major block to the ability to be able to just, hammer it out of existence. So what we need is to win the ground, win the right to govern by hopefully having, winning enough votes that you're free to be able to implement change. Now, obviously, there are some people in our country who are prepared to implement change in other ways, and
so
that's really dangerous.
You're questioning really if democracy can survive unregulated social media.
I think democracies are very challenged right now and have not proven they can move fast enough or big enough to deal with the challenges that we are facing. And to me, that is part of what this race, this election is all about. Will we break the fever in the United States?
That should be one of the scariest things you've ever heard. It's a person sitting in the Biden administration telling you the First Amendment is decidedly inconvenient. And they would really like to just win the right to govern so they can do the right things and destroy your ability to dissent. That's what I walked away with. Maybe you looked away, you heard something different. If you heard something different, please put it in the comments. That's a man sitting on a stage of a bunch of global elites with accents when they speak English that are not American. And they said, really, the challenge is that our democracy cannot just move fast enough to deal with this. We're talking about a system of government that was designed to move slowly because it is supposed to be inefficient on purpose. It is planned that way. And you have no right to be doing anything at a sweeping and global level or a national level. That's the whole purpose of the Bill of Rights, including the First Amendment, a-hole. How incredible. What a wild time for someone to think that getting up and saying that essentially the systems of democratic elections that happen within our republic are not moving quick enough for the tyrannical things that they would love to shove down your throats. And the answer is we need to just take power so that we can fix that. We're going to fix the glitch where you get to think for yourselves, and liberty is really decidedly inconvenient. What we want is consensus, and you're not allowed to have a dissenting opinion in our idea. I'm fairly confident that's a genocidal path they're walking down. That is something that has been done in a lot of places. When you force consensus, it's usually at gunpoint. Do you remember J.D. Vance talking the other day in an editorial discussing how the only way that you can permanently silence someone is by putting a bullet in their brain? That's been bothering me for a while. That political rhetoric has gotten to the point where we just need to silence our opponents. We can't listen to them and debunk it. The problem is when people on the left make arguments, they're almost always shot down. I've been watching a lot of Charlie Kirk videos. He does a really good job of debating. I don't know Charlie Kirk personally. I've heard pros and cons. And since I don't know him personally, I reserve my opinions about him. But I do enjoy him doing these videos where he's willing to engage a crowd of people coming up to a microphone, the same way I liked Ben Shapiro doing it. If we're talking about silencing people permanently, It should be done out of their fear and shame of being wrong and knowing nothing because they've stepped in front of a microphone in front of a crowd and they're just like, they don't get it. But that's not what the left wants to do, which maybe is the reason why Saturday Night Live tackled in their weekend update segment making fun of the assassination attempt on Donald Trump. It's a joke to them. They think it's funny. They've normalized it. It's totally fine. Right? Most of you probably don't watch Saturday Night Live. I sure as heck don't. I don't have time for that kind of thing. But I listen to it. They said, they're like, oh, I think that bullet hit more than just his ear. Look, I'm all about humor. I'm about dark humor, like real sick dark humor, because I've seen some dark things in my life. When you've been around people that have been killed, when you've done investigations into some things, when you've had bodies that are rotted on your hands, like there's a sick sense of humor that comes along with it to cope. But this is making light of something that should be so serious in this nation. And maybe that's why we have this going on. This is a little line from Fox News. I don't do a lot of Fox News, but this one says the Trump campaign pushed back on the SNL skit about the assassination attempt. This was the lead story from Catholic Vote, by the way. They called it disgusting. And at the same time, I found this picture from social media. That is a really tall, that's got to be what? That's 8 feet, probably maybe a 30-foot effigy of Donald Trump being hung from a crane. They had this outside the White House, too, for the entire time that Donald Trump was in office. Something to this effect. Kind of a fat baby Trump. And they would do things to it. All of this stuff is normalizing. Like, look, we've always had political rhetoric that got heated. We have political rhetoric in this country where we burned and hung people in effigy. There is a long tradition in Western culture, European and American, of lampooning and letting our political leaders that we are upset with them and therefore we hang them in effigy. We burn them in effigy. This is a reasonable political statement. You can have that. But it's not usually after someone tried to kill them. So maybe there's a moment where there's you want to talk about the censorship. They don't seem to have any problem with this. What they do have is a problem if you're sharing things that seem truthful, that seem honest, that seem accurate. They want to highlight things in a certain way, that editorial discussion. Here's something wild. Israel is widening the attacks on the Iranian-based militants. No mention of the fact, by the way, that this was kicked off by people who came into the country. Israel has killed 41,615 Palestinians, so saith the Palestinians, who kicked it off October 7th. We're coming up on the one-year anniversary of that. Israel, over 100 killed and 350 injured by Israeli strikes in Lebanon, the ministry says, in Lebanon. It's interesting when you see these things covered and they're trying to slant things a certain way. I don't have to love Israel. I don't have a strong feelings either, other than Israel should be allowed to defend itself as a nation and let it go. And I don't want the U.S. money involved in it. And I don't want our troops over there. Let them do their thing. By the way, they're fully competent and capable. They pull off better operations than the United States government does because they are single-minded on one thing. What is that? Values. They don't need to go and crush the dissent. They just have a government that understands that even people on the left and the right, if they want to continue to be a country, they've got to do certain things. And some of those things are going to be violence. And some of that violence is going to be meted out on bad people. So they use pagers and blow the dicks off people. They use two-way radios. Blow the faces off people that are trying to kill them. And they drop a bomb when those guys realize that they can't have, electronic communication. So they got to do it in person. They drop a bomb and take them out. Anybody who's been in the military, that sounds like pretty good tactics. It sounds like pretty restrained tactics too. The alternative would be what? Carpet bombing? But it's covered in the news like these people are the evil folks. They are slanting opinions. They are spoon feeding. And the answer is always learned helplessness. The answer is that we just have to elect the right U.S. president to be able to stop something that's happening so far away and has very little to do with us. At the end of the day, what happens over there is not much related to us. Even oil prices changing. We could have had total oil independence and almost did. And again, who is that guy? Donald Trump. It was a good policy. I also saw this story, which I might as well throw up there. Hezbollah is going to choose a new leader. Okay. Acting like it's some sort of legitimate organization that people should care about and talk about their political capabilities, which that's what happens in CNN. They have wall-to-wall coverage of this, by the way, right now. The other thing that's being covered right now in an interesting way is the International Longshoremen's Association, the ILA, says it will strike starting tomorrow. Is that our October surprise domestically? We know that labor unions are very well tied into the Democrat Party. They don't make a lot of moves without some top cover. I find this to be quite interesting that it's starting right now. It doesn't seem to break in the favor of Democrats. So I don't know how it plays out. But I know that if we have a logistical supply line change, what are they going to do? Parallel what happened under Donald Trump and say you're going to get more of this because he's not going to be able to negotiate the issue? We're talking about a potential strike right now. It's just so you're aware of what's coming down. I don't like to make prognostications. What I like to do is look at this and see this is a thing that should be on the radar. And it also, rather than seeing learned helplessness where you say, well, there's nothing we can do and we hopefully elect the right person who's going to solve this problem, you can create your own local solutions. In fact, over on Locals right now, I woke up to a video of one of our supporters, Dan, posted his weekend project, which was solving a chicken, what do you call this? Like a little encagement area for his chickens. That also happens to be working in a symbiotic relationship with fruit trees. Awesome. Great. Not learned helplessness. American spirit of ingenuity. Solve some problems that you have. Instead, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about this because this will cripple many people, particularly in urban areas, and I'm going to touch the urban area thing in just a moment. With a potential strike on ports up and down the East Coast and all along the Gulf Coast, set to begin midnight on Monday. That's tonight. Logistic executives tell CNBC that the remaining hours are critical for moving out as much trade as possible before a shutdown. They're going to be doing serious damage to the functioning of the United States economy. It goes on to talk about the numbers, the approximate value of freight being $2.7 billion. Won't be moving. It'll be locked in ports. Some of that is very interesting because the only reason that it can't move is because people work under unions. And as I understand the conflict, the union workers are essentially fighting for their jobs and their livelihoods. They're fighting for their ability to resist automation and mechanization that doesn't require people to physically do it. I've always been a little bit suspicious of how the longshoremen work. I had them as a client when I was working on my first sales job, and they seemed to have plenty of money for their office. They were one of the few people in the business that didn't seem to run the way that small businesses do. They ran more the way that government does, which is that they can write a check for anything because they can just grab it from their members. It actually is kind of the reason that I don't like unions in the first place. Again, it's a centralized control of people instead of decentralized at small factions. Small unions I have no problem with, location based. But if you're going to basically try to have this big movement, which they do, and of course that's the only way they're going to get massive changes, I guess, against large corporations. It seems like the federal government seems to do a lot of that already for us. Safe work conditions and so on, wages, either you work there or you don't. If somebody's willing to work there for cheaper, then probably they should. They're fighting against automation, which is basically inevitable at this point. So they're fighting an uphill battle that will eventually have to lose against technologies that are disrupting their industry. We're talking about a lot of money getting locked up in places. They said for the weekend, between the 23rd and the 27th, there were 273,000 plus, what do they call this? 20-foot equivalent units, TEUs, which is worth approximately almost $7 billion, $13.7 billion is being locked up in these ports in just a couple of days. The United States lives on things moving. And this could shut us all down in a big, big way. It's a big deal because this could disrupt the arguments that the Harris administration, the Kamala Harris and Joe Biden have been trying to say that they're doing it. They've got an act of God rocking things in North Carolina, which is a state that could go either way. And based on the federal response, which looks mediocre, all those people, will they even get to vote? Will they even be able to physically get there in the next month? Will it be cleaned up? These are questions. I don't actually have answers for them. Are we going to see a disruption that's going to change the way that you remember the toilet paper shortages and the fact that people couldn't get vehicles or chips? I mean, we're talking about all the things that happened during COVID. We already went through this not too long ago, and it worked out poorly for the administration in. And all the people that are going to be affected are mostly in urban areas, because those of you who are in rural areas that have some ability to interoperate with those in your community will probably be fine. The only thing I see that's going to be massively disappointing is that they're not going to be able to move fuel trucks. That's maybe the biggest game. And of course, luckily, the Biden administration has been slowly destroying our strategic fuel reserves to try to buy down oil prices by reducing it at government pricing. So they've been trying to artificially keep, fuel costs down. But we could see something really, really wild happen in the next couple weeks. We're 5 weeks away from an election. So the October surprise is always something that's kind of an unpredictable, even when they think that's going to go one way. Like I said, I think Jim Comey thought he was helping Hillary Clinton, and it went the other way. It's worth knowing. And all of these things make us feel more and more helpless. I'll throw a couple other things up here. Let's do a quick break over to my buddies over at Mad Hat Jerky. You guys were making orders over the weekend. I was getting emails. You guys order jerky at strange times. I'm not mad about it, but it is interesting. I catch these emails when I wake up. Matt Hat Jerky, MATT, 2 T's in Matt, 1 T in Hat, HAT, jerky.com/Kyle. The promo code Kyle saves you 20% on your first order. You should definitely do that. And if you guys end up liking what you got, I like the black truffle. That's my favorite. I get it in the USDA Prime packages, and I get the biggest bag they have, which is the 12 ounce. That's a lot of meat that's been condensed down because they take all the water out of it, right? If you guys want to get it, it's a tender product. It's a tasty product. It's the only protein I can get my 3-year-old to eat on a lot of days these days because he's kind of petulant. Promo code Kyle, Kyle, saves you 20%. MattHatJerky.com/Kyle. It's in the link in the show description. MattHatJerky.com/Kyle. Check them out. You guys will be happy. They last for like 90 days. It has a shelf life, but it does last for quite a long time. Check into that. Let's kind of pivot over to whistleblowers. Like I said, I'm going to try to tie this all up so that it all makes sense in one little thought. But let's do this one. What I'm seeing is government arguing for government. This is an article that I saw in the Government Accountability Project. You remember one of the best things that Donald Trump almost got done was something called Schedule F employment, creating a ability for the federal government and for the executive branch to remove long-term, sort of burrowed in like a tick, federal employees that have a significant amount of policy abilities, but are not appointed. It is the true administrative state. And being able to reclassify some of these people as Schedule F like Foxtrot. You guys keep that in your brain. Schedule F was the answer that the Trump administration the first time around came up with, getting rid of some of these people that are affecting their own policies that are not in conjunction with what was voted for. There is something to be said about long-term and, people lasting beyond administrations. And that's why we have the federal judiciary, but not in the executive, it turns out. The executive is not supposed to be designed that way. It's also not supposed to have as much power as it does. What you're seeing on the screen is my friend Marcus Allen, who's sitting there with his Bible as he testified. And I think we would all agree. I think all of the suspendables, whether it be Garrett O'Boyle or Steve Friend, myself, Marcus Allen, George Hill, that these embedded activists that exist within the federal government are the problem. What's interesting is the Government Accountability Project wrote an entire article about how the idea of Schedule F is actually a danger to whistleblowers. Not in my experience as a whistleblower. In my experience, Schedule F sounds like the only way. If you are a true whistleblower, I feel like there are two camps. One of them is, I see a bunch of problems, but I still want to work in my job. And so I'm trying to fix the agency and I'm staying here. And then there's the one that the suspendables took, which is that I see so many problems that I don't know if this thing can be saved. And if that means that I'm going to lose a job because my entire agency is so on the rocks right now that it should be destroyed, it needs to be scuttled, then that's okay too. Those are people who understand that their allegiance and their oath is to the Constitution, not the institution that they work for. I started reading Rob Greene's book over the weekend, and it's one of the things that he made the argument on this program. Institution over Constitution is why we are here, including people who work in the federal government, including people, the politicians that we see who work in Congress for both parties. They all want you to be helpless and to look to them to solve the problem, which they don't solve, but you have no other choice because you don't think that you can change the circumstances. Again, here it is. You believe through trial and error that the negative and uncontrolled situations are not solvable by your own means, and therefore you stop trying to change the circumstances, even though you have the ability to do so. The ability is to act locally. And you continually find this when you have a small example of something difficult happening to you. My wife while I was gone, had the battery in our minivan completely die, like 0 to not going to work anymore. Wouldn't even take a jump, wouldn't even start in any situation. And there I am, stuck in Houston in an airport, knowing that my wife is stuck down the street and I can't do anything about it. And she's only a half a mile from home. Do you know what the solution was? It wasn't the federal government. It wasn't even a big organization like AAA. It was a driver who lived in the neighborhood who drove by and saw a woman standing there in a minivan with the hood up, and a neighbor who lived just down the corner from us who brought the battery, because I'd already bought a battery to swap out. I knew we were getting there. It was a stranger who came and put a battery in for a mother of 4 standing there at a gas station. That's the solution. It's not learned helplessness. It's localized support. We can all kind of see this in our own lives. Think about any time that you've been on the side of the road. I've had it happen before, and nobody stops. Why do they not stop? Because we've learned that somebody else will handle it. And that's part of the learned helplessness, because then you have to go out there and get bigger organizations. It should be a smaller solution, even when the problems are bigger, because if we all do the small solutions, we're going to get closer to it. I want to show you body cam footage. Let me first show you this. This is just a meme. This is a guy in a hotel. He says, "Hey, hi, I'd like a wake-up call." It made me think of John Kerry, since he goes and talks about the climate so much. And it's got the woman at the hotel desk. And she says, "You are the carbon that they want to eliminate." I think that's partially true. It's partially accurate. And here's the other one, because this is all part of the same thing. It's the astronaut meme. You guys have seen this before. If you're listening to us, imagine there's an astronaut who's looking at the Earth and having a revelation, and there's another astronaut behind with like a handgun. It's like in 1911. And so the first astronaut says, "Cultural relativism is a Trojan horse to take advantage of our empathy. It's a question." And the one behind says, "Yes, always has been." That's kind of the dark, like hitting you with the dark fact. We're at that point now where it's time to realize that suicidal compassion, that empathy, it is part of the learned helplessness, because when you think that the federal government is going to solve your problems, the biggest answer is always going to be, it's always the worst answer, folks. And that's why it's bringing things in. And then people think they can't do anything. Let me show you how a national, and this is a microcosm, how a national problem of bringing in a bunch of immigrants and a culture of learned helplessness, which is to say, I don't know what to do, I got to call somebody to solve the problem, results in a 60-year-old woman getting battered in a bathroom and then basically waiting for the cops. I'm going to play this video, and then I'm going to tell you my take on it in a second here. I think it's worth understanding. This is the story. I took it from End Wokeness, which is a Twitter account. It says, "Breaking: Mohammed Kamara attacks and attempts to kidnap a 60-year-old lady in the bathroom in Columbus, Ohio, in the suburbs." So it's not exactly Columbus, Ohio. That area has seen a 350% increase in the immigrant population since 2019, and not all immigrants are legal immigrants. This one is obviously a Muslim guy who doesn't understand U.S. culture, values, taking advantage of our empathy. Here we go.
Take a look at this body camera video. You see Hilliard officers running into the store.
This way? Okay.
Employees pointing police to the restroom where the victim's family was able to hold the suspect, Mohammed Kamara.
All right. Lock your fingers, put your hands on your back. You're being detained.
According to court records, Kamara was seen on store cameras following the 60-year-old victim until she enters the restroom. When she left the stall, Kamara was standing near the sinks. The victim questioned why he was there, and that's when police say he attacked, grabbing her throat, slamming her against the wall, and covering her mouth. But she was able to scream, getting the attention of her family, her son calling 911.
I mean, my mom wasn't there alone with him, so yes, he burst through the door to make him get off of my mom.
Okay. Do you guys know him, or is he just a random guy that approached your mom?
Just a random guy. No, my mom walked into the bathroom, and all of a sudden we heard screaming, yelling for my dad, and luckily we were close, and so my dad went and burst in there because my mom was screaming for help.
Okay, here's my problem. The younger man, the dad's got to be in his 60s, right? Mom's in his 60. Dad's got to be in his 60s. The younger man decided to stay outside and call 911 because he's been emasculated. I'm speculating here, but that's what it sounds like to me. The older man, the 60-year-old man, went in. So rather than go and rescue your mom, you stayed outside. That's learned helplessness, folks. That's what that looks like. That is all of the stories in one. It's terrible decisions from the federal government. It's a reliance on like the police when you're the problem, like you're the solution right there. The problem is in front of you and you can solve it, and you chose not to. You chose to hopefully call because you've learned that that's not an option. And you notice it's a generational change. That's guys probably in my generation if you're going to do the math on it. I'm going to stand by and hope my dad can fight somebody because my mom is screaming for help inside of a bathroom. You do that around me, Muhammad's not coming out of that bathroom probably. I can probably articulate a deadly force scenario, particularly when someone weaker than me is being assaulted. If he's grabbing throats and slamming people around, it's a Mozambique drill. That's 2 in the chest, 1 in the head. Eliminate the threat. Stop the aggression. The police can come in afterwards. That's not learned helplessness, but that's how this poor guy operated. Again, I'm going to throw it on the screen. Be aware of it and do all the things you can to resist it. And that includes sort of giving up and being blackpilled and saying there's nothing I can do to help. Yeah, go vote and go move things around locally and go meet your neighbors. I keep seeing these repeated themes as I go out and talk to people. It doesn't matter where I go. Meet your neighbors. They're probably awesome. I met a bunch of neighbors of the folks that hosted me out in Tennessee, and they were awesome. They live where you do because they have the values you do, even if they don't have the same politics that you do. They probably do if you spent some time hanging out with them. So don't let these people be your enemy. They're right around you, and they're going to be the ones that are going to help you when your car has a battery die out and you're out of town. They're going to be the ones that are going to see something that goes wrong and know that it was like what's normal for you and what's not normal. They're going to be the ones in the grocery store that hear your wife getting attacked in a bathroom and are going to come in there. So make them part of your community. Like, we need to expand these bounds, not nationally. I don't care about nationally. I really don't. We're talking about locally, even though this program gets put all over the country. And everywhere I've gone, I've met people that listen to it, which is pretty amazing for as small a show as we are. Everywhere I go, some of you come out and talk to me. So I'm really grateful that you're out there. Go out there and make that spider web grow. Like, connect. Join AMCON if you want. But know that you are the solution that you are waiting for. It is not Donald Trump. It is not Kamala Harris. It is not your senator. And it is not your congressional representative. It's probably your city council. It might be your mayor, as long as you're involved. At some point, I'll probably bring my dad back on again because they're going through this again in a little town called Payson, Arizona. But you know what? They're involved deeply, and they're having the conversations at their own kitchen tables and at their fire pits. They're out there having these conversations about their little town because they care, because they know that their town is their business. And they're not pleading to some state authority to come and fix it. They're trying to do it themselves because that's who it affects, and that's who cares the most about it. And it's the same for you. No one cares more about what goes on in your house than you. And no one cares more about what goes on in your street than you. And no one cares more about your community than you if you care. So start caring. Most of you probably already do. Take that action step. Get out there. I'm preaching today, but I see it. And the other amazing thing is that it will absolutely make you feel empowered. It will take that helplessness, that feeling that we are not going to be able to do it. It doesn't even matter. I have full expectations, which is a terrible thing, that we are not going to see fairness happen in 5 weeks. I think that based on the people I've met, and it's not a self-selected group, it's just random people all over the place, people that I look at and I go, that's not my tribe. And then they turn around and they're wearing a shirt that says the 5 F's are flag, family, faith, freedom. I don't remember what the last F was, but there were 5 F's. Those 5 F's, it's like, yeah, awesome. That person was in my tribe and I didn't even know it. They're wearing a t-shirt to tell me that they're in my tribe. And I still don't think, even though I think there's the overwhelming number of majority of people lean the way that we do, which is that they just want rationality and reasonability. They want people that actually care about outcomes. They think fairness is important, that liberty is actually a value we should all get to. Those people probably are not going to see a victory in November because I don't think it's fair. But you can still just mute all of that garbage by fixing it locally. So I encourage you to do it. All right, my palate cleanse for the day, kind of a little lighthearted thing, is that I imagine that this is a deer blind jokes. These are deer blind dad jokes. But these will be the same kind of jokes that guys will be telling if they're sitting in a sniper's hide and that we're trying to fight for this country back. So the kind of people that are willing to sit and wait for a deer all day, that have that kind of goofy sense of humor, that understand that for life to continue, that's part of the cycle and death is part of it. People that know where their food comes from tend to have like pretty good sense of humor. That's just my experience. I've been part of these jokes, whether you're out fishing or whether you're out, going after deer, or you're going after other animals, sitting and waiting for coyotes to try to kill calves. You're going to shoot them. These are deer blind jokes from dads. You guys will get a kick out of it, I think. Like a little bit of lighthearted stuff. It's going to be a heavy week. It's going to be a heavy month, but we can still laugh. By the way, yeah, firearms may have been the last one. Vet cop may have me right on the force. Here we go.
How do you make an egg roll? You push it. You always make my day. If you have 3 shotguns in one hand and 10 decoys in the other hand, what do you have? I don't know. Big hands. I'd say so.
Didn't even try to figure it out.
The waiter asked me if I wanted a box for my leftovers. I told him I don't like fighting. Why can't you hear a pterodactyl go into the bathroom?
I don't know.
Because the pee is silent.
It's just stupid humor, but the laughter makes me happy. Listening to people laugh about stupid things like that, knowing that there's some things that are just not serious, especially when you're doing something that might be serious, you know, like sitting with a gun, waiting to do something to an animal. That is kind of serious, but the P is silent in pterodactyl. Like, what the hell? Also, the concept, I'm never going to be able to get a box. Now, there's some things that change you, the way that you look at stuff. And when someone, I had a guy in basic training one time ask me if I wanted to tail gun the sheets at the bottom of my bed. And every bed that I've made since June of 2009, I have thought about tail gunning the sheets, not knowing what the hell that means. But he said it, and I'm like, We lifted up the mattress and we swept the sheets underneath it. It meant something in context. I'll never make a bed and not think that. And I might not ever go and see someone ask me if I want to box for my leftovers, and thinking that they want to put some gloves on and hit me in a ring. Go figure. It's a dumb joke. Some of the stuff that we're living is kind of a dumb joke, so humor is the only way through it. Anyway, appreciate all of you. I appreciate you guys supporting us. You can support my friends over at Catholic Vote. You guys should check it out too if you want some better news that also keeps us focused and doesn't get us distracted. CatholicVote.org. They've got a sweepstakes right now where you can win tickets to the Chiefs game and go see Catholic hero, what's his name, Harrison Butker, play. So if you guys want to do that, go check them out. They got a sweepstake going on, no purchase necessary, some kind of thing like that, blah, blah, blah. CatholicVote.org is where you go do it. Follow them on social media at Catholic Vote. They support our program, so we're really appreciative of them, and I'm appreciative of all of you. You guys can join us on the Locals show. That's the last thing. KyleSerafin.com if you want to be part of our community. We're posting internal things. Do not be afraid to share your internal solutions, your connections with your community, the things that you're spending your time doing. That's what we're all about. It's a community on purpose. It's not Kyle Serafin out sharing stuff. I want to know what you guys are up to. You guys can post your videos there behind the wall so that only people that are part of our team and a part of our community can see it. And go do that at KyleSerafin.com. Join us over there. Only the best people are in the Kyle Serafin Show community. Just saying. All right, y'all. That's it for today. Go out there and take a deep breath. Like I said, have a little bit of humor about it. Be aware. Don't allow forced helplessness to keep you from the actions that you can take locally, because there's a lot of them. And there's a lot of stuff right now trying to push you away from those. So be your own first responder, be your own sort of solution to the problems, whatever those are. Nearest to you first. Prioritize them correctly. See you again tomorrow. I hope you guys have a great day. God bless you. Take it easy.
Thanks for listening to The Kyle Serafin Show, streamed live weekdays on rumble.com/Kyle Serafin. Follow Kyle on Twitter, Truth Social, and Instagram at Kyle Serafin.